Rob, how are you, sir?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you coming on. Listen, I want to jump right into this. You're a guy who has had the opportunity to play at the big league level. And so obviously, like anyone else, you started out at a young age. But can you kind of talk about your youth days in Fort Wayne and how you developed your love for the game of baseball?
Yeah, I guess it's completely different how it is nowadays with amateur baseball. But my youth baseball career, I played little league all the way up until I was 12, and I didn't play travel ball and all that extra stuff when I was a kid. I didn't start travel ball until I think I was 13. So at the time where I was growing up, for everybody says for the love of the game is we could just go out, and I did only play around 20 games a year for our little league schedule. But we would always get together after the games and go play or go throw and go hit together. And that's kind of where we basically learned some of our kind of instincts as we grew up playing. Is we'd always just go out there and mess around and try different things. So that's where our love kept growing, and it didn't really turn into like a business feel or a profession feel at a young age. So I think that's what really kept me hungry coming up through my amateur days.
Nice. And were you a multi sport guy or was it just baseball?
Yeah, I was a baseball, football, basketball guy up through middle school, and then as soon as I got to high school, I was in a situation where I had to pick between baseball and football because I played in a fall league in South Bend, Indiana, starting up my freshman year, so I can play a couple more games a year. And of course, it interfered with football, so I had to pick a sport, and fortunately, I picked the right one.
Nice. And would you say that playing multiple sports helped you into developing into a professional athlete?
Oh, without a doubt. This day and age, like I said, technology is different, and the internet's different now, so it is a little bit easier to find some workout stuff, some agility type stuff that you could do more. Everybody says sports specific, but movement is movement, in my opinion, when it comes to working out. But that's why I did multiple sports. Is I like playing the other ones. I love baseball, but I like playing the other sports. It kept me competitive during the off season. The biggest thing is kept me in shape. Basketball was really great at running around. I didn't have all the money in the world, so I can go out and hire personal trainers to go out and train all that stuff, on my own. So that's what sports did for me. Was it kept my competitive juices flowing in the off seasons, and also kept me in shape.
And how did you develop this competitiveness, or was this something that you just kind of always had?
Uh, I think it's I think it's kind of both. I think you have a lot of it that's instilled in you, but I think you can also train a little bit of it in how you prepare and how you train. But obviously, I think most of it is going to come from your upbringing and just being born with it. I just, everybody calls somebody a natural competitor, and you look back and they've always been like that since they were small. But there are some things you can do to kind of fine tune some things, but that for a large part, like I said, I think it's mostly natural.
Yeah. So in your youth days, were you a guy that kind of stood out physically, or were you kind of a late bloomer type? Can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Uh, yeah, I guess I guess I'm kind of both. That sounds kind of weird, but I was always had a really good arm because I did a lot of stuff with my arm. I threw a lot, I did a lot of long toss when I was a kid. And I actually did all the shoulder weights and stuff like that nobody wanted to do. And I really stuck out with my arm. I was a very good hitter, but of course, hitting's different nowadays. Everybody's into homers and all that stuff. I always hit for a very high average, and I had extra bases. I would hit some homers when I got a hold of it in a certain spot, and it would go. So I was flashes, but the consistency and just wasn't there yet. But you can see that it can come with time of learning how to execute the play better. But for me, I was a very very high contact. I was a very very high average guy everywhere I played. But as I got older, I started working more and more, and that's where I taught myself how to switch it when I was 16 because of my arm strength, because I was way ahead in my defensive stuff as I worked, and that was my biggest attribute was I outworked anybody. That's why I continue to get better and better and continue to stay above everybody, because I just outworked everybody, and that's where I think the biggest attributes of my success came was I just refused to say to myself, I'm good right here. I'm good enough. As I hate that word good enough. I don't want to be just good enough. I want to be better than everybody else.
Nice. And at what age did you say, you know what, I'm pretty good at this, and that's what I think I want to do. I'm gonna put my head down and I'm gonna work. At what age did you say that baseball was what you wanted to kind of pursue?
If you ask anybody, it's going to be since they were a little kid. But I guess realistically, when I was around 15, kind of eighth grade going in the freshman year, I was getting letters from colleges already. Starting, the interest was coming up. A couple pro scouts had mentioned something to my father about, the prospects of me being able to be a pro type player, because I was taller. I had a pretty good build and obviously my arm strength and the ability to contact the baseball. So they saw a lot of opportunities in my body. So it was natural that, okay, everybody wants to do it. I wanted to do it. I had the work and I had the drive, and I was starting to see, okay, this can become a reality. It's, things are starting to line up that if I continue to do this and continue to, see the fruits of my labor pay off, again, it's giving me even more drive to keep going in my workouts and in my attitude and in my sacrifices I do during my daily life, that I can do that. So I would probably say around that 15-year mark, like it's eighth grade going into freshman year.
Nice. And you said you did a lot of long toss. Where did that come from? Did someone say, hey, if you want to work on your arm, you need a long toss? Or is this something that you kind of figured out on your own? How did you figure out that the long toss was what you need to do?
Yeah, it was just coming through some of my coaches. It's always been around. I know there's a lot of new stuff now with home care and specifically with a lot of the plow ball work and everything. But the shoulder work, the cuff weight work has always kind of been around, and the long toss has always been around. Listening to guys back playing back then, but it was still, and I know Alan Jager talks about it a lot. During that time, when I was growing up, it was a lot of that shoulder work was really kind of reserved for people who were hurt and they were coming back. But when you see them come back, they would come back stronger. And, you start to sit there and figure things out. And that's what, that's what I really like Alan is, you watch that stuff and you're like, there's a reason why they're coming back stronger now. So they're doing more work than they've ever done. So that, people always called it prehab, back when I was a kid and growing up. And I know Barry Zito, when he was going through, minor league and coming up to the big leagues, they talked about that prehab and the shoulder workouts and everything. So that's where I really start to see a lot more of that. So it kind of confirmed some things that we were doing as a kid. And I was coming up through amateur ball. Is okay. This is making sense now.
Nice. And whenever you were 15 and started to say, okay, this might be a possibility, for you to put in the type of work that you did, there were obviously sacrifices that you made. So can you kind of talk a little bit about what some of those sacrifices were, and then how much work you actually put in?
Yeah, and this is one of the things when I go around talking to the teams and camps and clinics and all that kind of fun stuff is, the word sacrifice and the word committed, to me goes hand in hand. And, a lot of people say they're committed, but when it comes down to it, are you willing to sacrifice some things that you typically do as a kid, go out and have fun on a Friday night, go to a football game on Friday night. I have to go out, I got a girlfriend and it's tying me down and, I want to go hang out with her. But, I sacrificed a lot of that, and I went to, a party here and there, but on Friday nights I would go to a baseball facility, go hit. Before school, I'd wake up at 4:00. I'd go to the gym and I would lift. And then after school, I got a job at a baseball place just so I could hit every day. And I would go there and pass out tokens for the batting cage. I'd go there, knock out my homework, and then when it would be quiet there, not a lot of people, as I go in and I start hitting. I start hitting off a tee and hit off some of the pitching machines that were in there. It was just those things that I tried to align myself with what I wanted to do, with my career in baseball. And a lot of people, call it crazy, but at the same time, that's what passion is. Passion is crazy and for what you want to do. And some people see that way, and some people don't. But like I said, I can think with the competitiveness, the drive and desire, I think some of those are natural born character traits that are in people. And fortunately, I have to thank my parents for that, for my upbringing and the way they raised me in that. So I think obviously without that, I would not be where I am today.
Yeah, so whenever you were hitting in the cages, were you always able to kind of have a plan, knowing what you were working on, or did you just go in there and get reps? How did you understand what you need to do, what to work on, or was it more just knowing that you need to kind of get some reps in?
I'll say this, and I kind of say with a simple. I thought I knew what I was doing, but and again back then I always go back to it because everybody's so fortunate these days with what to have access to. Is the internet was there, but it wasn't there. Recordings I used to record. I was a big Chipper Jones fan growing up. I liked him, Javi Lopez, Ivan Rodriguez. Those are guys I really looked up to, and I would actually record their swings off of VHS. And I'm sure most young people probably don't know what a VHS is, but that's actually a tape that we used to have back in the day. But I would go back and watch the real grainy slow motion of the swings, and I would try to mimic some of those things. And actually, you watch me in high school. I had a double tag in high school from Chipper Jones, and it made me hit better. And I took a few lessons as a kid, and then as I got older, past 14, I didn't really take individual lessons. I went out and hit myself, and I'd go out and take a couple hundred swings from each side of the plate every night. And I would just, try to focus on the square up and hit it hard. That was all my thing was. I wanted to hit hard. And I didn't really have as precise of a plan as I did when I got in the pro ball and got around some really good coaches. But obviously, I was ahead of the curve in respect to a lot of the people because, I watched big league hitters and tried to do the things that they did. So that obviously kind of prepared me a little bit more than just a typical person in there trying to hit the hit.
Right. So you were a catcher. How much work was involved in that? And did you have someone throw balls to you? Did you throw against the wall?
Oh yeah.
What type of work went into that development as a catcher?
Yeah, I dragged my dad out, and he would go to some of the bases, and I would throw to it, and then he would actually go out and lay a big trash can on each base, and I would try to throw the ball into the trash can, and I just do rep after rep after rep, and I would do at least 30 to 40 throws to each base to where it becomes second nature, and close your eyes and throw it, and you'd be there, time after time, and now as I got older and I learned all the stuff I did, it's for consistency. It's for that, what people call is, I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden, but it'll come back to me. But the consistency and getting there and making the play and executing each time. That's what I see with a lot of young kids now is they don't do enough reps, and muscle memory is what I was thinking of. They don't do enough reps in controlled environments to build that muscle memory, so that way they don't have to think. It just becomes a reaction, and that's so it really helped me is going out there, and you don't have to air it out every single time to have something be productive. That's the other one too. Is what I did as a kid is I would try to throw it as hard as I could, and I'd do it for a long time until I hurt, and then I wouldn't hurt after a couple of days, and I'd go back out there and do it again. And I learned to kind of pace myself so that way I can do more reps and become better.
And were you big into the visualization and the mirror work and that type of stuff?
as a kid, I wasn't. I would kind of check myself in the mirror, kind of watch my swing a little bit. I got more into the visualization, towards I guess, the middle part of my minor league career coming up. As I got around some coaches and really started to understand, the mental side of hitting and the approach and the plan of creating a better sense of yourself being ready at the plate, with your mind.
And when you were in high school, what were those years like? In terms of playing well, the coaches, the team. In terms of developing you into getting you ready for the pro ball level.
I have to give my head coach Keith Potter a lot of credit at Homestead for this main reason is my sophomore year is when I started to switch hit, and my freshman year I came up and I started playing varsity, kind of back and forth. I was on reserve varsity, and towards the end of the year I was pretty much on varsity the entire time. Splitting time with the other catcher. But after the freshman year, I was sitting right-handed, and then I decided that I wanted to commit to learning the art of switch hitting because I thought it would help my draft status and become a better player towards the draft. And after everything you see with matchups in baseball and numbers, and of course now with analytics, which is just basically numbers, everybody is so keen on matchups and seeing that. So back then, the right-handed, left-handed matchup was huge, and I was a right-handed versus facing a lot of right-handed, so I was like, well, if I can be left-handed, that may help my ability to get drafted a little bit better if I can do it. So after that freshman year, as I went up to South Bend, I started to really teach myself to switch hit and get in there and do the reps. And I told my coach, and obviously at this point I was a pretty good player, being able to play as a freshman up there at varsity. At first, I think it was kind of taken back a little bit because obviously, being a coach and a competitiveness and a coach, you don't want your player to take a step back and for that failure point of realizing, okay, this hitter may go down a little bit and my team may suffer. But he stuck with me, and I had I guess you can say in terms of high school, it was a so-so, not a great year with that learning the switch here because I was doing it at the varsity level as a sophomore. And after that season, it clicked. During my summer ball season, it really started to click because I got all those at-bats from the fall. I got those at-bats during this high school season. And in the summer ball season that year, it really started to click. And obviously after that, the rest is history. With my junior year, having obviously a very, very good year my junior year, set the batting average record, all that fun stuff at that time in my high school. And, being able to go and playing all these different things that I've done in high school with Team USA and area codes and going down and playing South America is so obviously I owe a lot to that to my coach by letting me do that. So it was a different process than what a lot of people are used to up in that Fort Wayne area with the attention that I got and with the ability to play all the different things I got to play because, like I said, amateur ball the way it is now, it wasn't like that back then. So it was a big deal if all of a sudden you went to go play for Team USA because Team USA didn't have 15 teams like they do now. It was not as developed as it was. So obviously it was a huge debate, and the Perfect Game was just starting. They were still obviously they're still based in Iowa, but they were mostly just up there putting on some local tournaments, and they were trying to get their feet on the ground. Obviously, we see what the empire they are today. But
Yeah, so whenever you started switch hitting, you said you wanted to improve your status. So what kind of work went into doing that, developing that left side? Because, did you give up some of the right side rep to get more left side reps? Or, kind of talk about, what kind of work went into that?
I went straight, very rudimentary. I started on a tee, and we had you may remember, it's called a solo hitter, which was endorsed by Tony Gwynn. I had that in my garage, which is a lot like the hit away thing that's out now. Same kind of concept. So I would do that and just take hacks and hacks and hacks. And, I did it the old school way. Is just, sitting there and I'm going to swing it out. I'm going to swing my way through this problem. And, so obviously it took a little bit more time because, I was young and I didn't have all the access to all the tools and all the cool gizmos that are out now to help you speed that pace up. So it was just good old fashioned grunt, hard work, trying to hone that skill.
Do you think that if you were to have had access to some of that stuff, you would have developed faster, or do you think that the way you did it is kind of the way to go?
No, I definitely think with having all the access and the information that's out today, there's a lot of good information. There's a lot of terrible information out there. But with what we have today is you can speed up the development process and your ability to get better easily. But here's the caveat I always tell people, and this is you can't find this on the internet. It's only inside of you. You have to be willing to put in the work, and you have to be willing to be committed and make those sacrifices, because this is not like hey, I'll just pick it up and go do this when I feel like it. So I'll go pick maybe for an hour. I'll do it now. And you have to saturate your life in it, and then you will see the fruits of your labor. People just don't understand what hard work really is. People think hard work is when I'm told I have to work hard. That's not hard work, and that's not sacrifice. Sacrifice is doing things when you're not expected to do it, and you're going out and doing it. So people have kind of a false impression of working hard and being committed nowadays, thinking that, I'm doing all this work and working on this launch angle and working on a better approach and all this stuff, and they still can't hit. They haven't been totally committed in the process of the development, and just their sheer work volume is just not there. And that's the separator from all these people who take it to the next level, to college baseball, and even further into pro ball, and even further into that, making it to the big league.
Yeah, I agree. The putting in the work part, not a lot of guys, really understand what that means. So with so now you're out of high school and you get drafted by the Twins,
mm-hmm.
and now you report. What was that like? You put in all this work, you finally get drafted. What was the emotion like? What was the thought process like? Can you talk a little bit about that time?
Yeah, I was a huge fish in a tiny pond up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And when I got drafted, went down to Fort Myers, and I became a really, really small fish in a humongous ocean. So it's everybody's the same, and there it is. Everybody can hit balls really far, and everybody can throw hard. And now all of a sudden, I was like, oh goodness, there's a pretty big world out there that has a lot of good players. So it kind of opened my mind and opened my eyes to find out, okay, now how do we get above these guys? What do I have to do now to try to separate myself from someone who throws around as hard as I do, or can hit the ball kind of as far as I do? How do I find that piece that makes it more consistent? And this is what the minor leagues is all about. Minor leagues is all about is trying to find a way to create a routine so you can find a way to be more consistent every single time. Because everybody throws 95, but how can you throw 95 and constantly get people out and constantly throw strikes and not be in a position where you're always walking somebody? Or if I'm a hitter, how do I piece that together where I look awesome at 5 o'clock taking BP, but at 7:30 or at 9 o'clock at night in the seventh inning, I'm always striking out or I'm always rolling over? How can I figure out and put that 5 o'clock swing into my 7 o'clock swing? And that's what is all about minor league life, is figure out that part. And that's where I got around some good coaches, and obviously I had a pretty good head. I was pretty mentally prepared for it because you are out on your own at 18 years old. down in Fort Myers, Florida, in a really, really nice vacation spot. Paying my own bills. Not in college. I'm not being held with a silver spoon in my mouth in college. And I'm not kind of cuddled up in a college atmosphere. You're in the real world. You lose this job here, you are in the real world. You're out on your own. So there's no little pillow that's there for you when you fall. You fall and you're going to hit yourself hard on the ground if you fail. So you need the mentality for that also.
Right, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Obviously, you did well in the minor league. I'm looking at your numbers right now. You did pretty well. So, but you also came to a major reality of whew, this is kind of tough. Tougher than what I'm used to. So, you are experiencing more failures and slumps. So can you kind of talk about that first period where you were kind of like, geez, this is different, and I got some things that I got to figure out.
Yeah, I never really knew what the word failure meant. I would go 2 for 4, and I thought I did lousy in high school. But you go into pro ball and you're 2 for 4, you got a good day. So it's the realization that failure, going 1 for 30, that's failing. 1 for 3 or 2 for 4 is not failing. It'd be a pretty good career if you do that the rest of your life. So that was the hardest part for me, is when I went, 1 for 15, 2 for 20, I'm like, oh my gosh, 3 days and you can have 20 bats. And all of a sudden I was just like, how in the world am I going to be able to get myself out of this hole that I just dug? And again, that goes to the routine in your process of, trying to find something to keep you consistent. Because if you just totally cave into that and stop working or overwork and do the wrong things, trying to get yourself up and trying to go 4 for 4 when you only have 1 at bat coming up. And the next thing you know, you're another 0 for 10 because you're trying to get those 5 hits and 1 at bat. And, you just don't know how to work yourself out of that. And that's where the experience comes in of, being around a while, but even more as a young guy, not having that year level of really going through it and understanding it and have that experience of it, is get around people who have done it before. Get around good coaches who can help coach you through that process, along with some of the mechanical stuff. But that's why I'm a big mental guy, and I believe in the approach takes to the timing and takes to your mechanics when it comes to hitting, and really when it comes to a lot of stuff in baseball. But that's the biggest part is that mentality there.
Right, I agree. When you were talking about developing your routine at 18 years old, how did you start that process? Obviously you didn't have, and maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but a fine-tuned routine as to, this is what I'm going to do to keep you from overworking, because that's kind of the natural tendency. We think that we have to do more. So how did you develop this routine, and did you have it figured out?
Oh no! I mean, you look at my career. I never had it figured out, but it's always it's trial and error. And people are looking for the magic bullet, the silver bullet. Give it to me, so that way I can do it and I don't have to worry about it. They want to go on the internet and figure out and find that solution right there, and then bam, there it is. I can take it and I don't have to worry about it. But it's that's why. There's a lot of people in a rude awakening. It doesn't happen like that. Everybody's case is different because of their mental ability, physical ability, chances, luck, all that kind of fun stuff. So there's not one way. There's a way, and that's what you have to find. You have to find your way, and a lot of it goes with trial and error, and obviously, it can help with coaches, trying, going through their experiences. This is what I've experienced, and this is what I've experienced, and this is why I think a lot of people are gonna get hurt also. And what I went through personally also with my swing is they try to force somebody else's way into their way without any change, and try to do everything, and that always doesn't work either, especially mentally, but even more with the mechanics of it. So that's where I got some really good advice from John Russell, who I'm not sure where he is now. I know he caught Noah Ryan back in the day when he was with Texas. Very, very coach. He was with the Orioles for a long time as a bench coach, and he told me one thing is you're going to get a lot of information from a lot of different people. And if you try to do every single thing that somebody tells you, you're going to fail because you're going to have so many people telling you what to do. Is you have to take bits and pieces of what people tell you that work for you, and the other pieces that don't work for you, forget it. And use those bits and pieces from each person and make it your own and create your own. And that really stuck with me and it resonated with me. And, when I did that, especially for my swing, is my career took off, and I went from AA, AAA up to the big leagues, and went up and down for a little bit, and then obviously I stayed up there for a while. So that's what really helped me, come along. And obviously, as that happened, my routine got better. When my routine got better, my play got better, my ability got better, and ultimately my mechanics got better. But my consistency got better, and that's what got me there.
Yeah, that's always a tough conversation because you get to that level and you say, okay, all these people, they should have my best interests, in mind. Though they might have. So now we're sitting here thinking that they might have the silver bullet to get me to the next step, or and then the next thing you're trying everything, and now you're not doing the things that you need to be doing. So that's the conversation, a tough conversation. So how would you advise, an 18-year-old kid, and he's getting ready to report? How would what would the conversation be like with him to say, listen, man, you're going to get, all this information, be respectful, and at the end of the day, do what you got to do.
Yeah, and like I said, you can, look in the back of my baseball card, you see the numbers, or what have you. As you see my numbers in the minor leagues, and you see the drastic change that I had, and at that point, they wanted to change my entire swing completely and turn me into something that I wasn't. After I had some good success, some really good success at the minor league level, and completely changed everything that worked there. And that's obviously, when you saw that change and when I start to go back up, is when I got that advice from John, and understanding that and realizing and changing back to, not to say my previous way, but a lot of stuff that I did my way, but also instilling a couple different things from different people to make myself get there. And that's where, I still tell people today that I work with is you're going to get a lot of information. A lot of stuff will make sense for you, and some of that stuff won't make sense for you. But for another person, some of that information that does not make sense for you makes sense for them. So again, each individual has their own journey. You can't take everything from someone's journey and all of a sudden think that it's going to make your journey better. It just doesn't. Not everybody's a human being, which means everybody's different. And that's where you have to learn to kind of navigate and pick up some things, some traits, some tips, some do's and some don'ts. That's going to help you personally. And then there's always going to be confrontation, or I won't say confrontation, but there's always going to be some contested information that you may go, and that's where you have to sit down and actually have a conversation, and that's why I credit some of the best coaches I was around is I can sit there and talk with them, and we can go through, and I can actually tell them this is what I feel during this. This is what this is why I'm just not being successful at this because I'm trying to do this and not do that. And the best coaches that I had didn't get mad at me. Is they sat there, okay, well that's fine. Well, let's work at different routes, or let's try something different and see what you get. And again, it's not all coaches are created equal. Coaches are also just like players. They're trying to get to the ultimate level too. They do have your best interest in mind, and I totally understand that. But at the same time, they are trying to get to the next level, and they want you to do good. But then again, not every coach has that ability to connect with a player, or maybe how to preach a certain point to get to that player. So that's where you just kind of have to kind of navigate those rough waters at times as you work your way through amateur ball, into college, into pro ball, and through the big league level.
Would you say right around that time you got that great advice that you kind of started to really understand who you were as a hitter?
Yeah, I saw myself in a different light, to where I was more individualized instead of, this is where I am. I'm somebody said I'm going to be this, and I can't be that. I'm going to be me, and that's what really changed. And I'd see, okay, there's some the pieces of that are in me, and pieces of that are in me, but I'm not all of that. Because then again, that's where a lot of people have failure is they try to do something entirely of someone else, where they just need a piece of that to part. And that's where I see the instructions out today, and a lot of information out today, and it's like, if you don't do everything, you're not going to be successful. Well, I'll call BS on it, because I play with a lot of really good guys that have really a lot of good different opinions. I played with some guys that thought swing down that are in the Hall of Fame. I saw some guys that try to drive through a ball or drive up to a ball, but it's what worked for them. And that's where, I get upset when I see people trying to tell somebody they have to do it this way, because most of those people who say that never had a good career. And the guys that I was around that were really good coaches and really successful players, you don't care how you did it. You just have to learn to do it. And there's a different way of doing that to be successful. So that's what hurts a lot of people in the game, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, so as being a catcher, that's a very tough position. And what was the minor league like in terms of developing you as a catcher? What were the things that they said you really need to work on in order for you to kind of get to the big league level as a catcher?
For me, I was always that's kind of my forte. I was known as a very good catcher, mechanically, based in and all that kind of fun stuff. But I think what really helped me too was I never had any coaches call games for me when I was in amateur ball. Even in Little League, I called my own games. So I started, and again, that goes back to what's missing in amateur ball today. And I hate to say sandlot baseball, but there's no sandlot baseball. There's no kids just going out playing and trying different things. Kids are robots nowadays, to where they can't do anything unless you tell them. But we were different. We went out there and did stuff and tried different things and learned different things. So we became instinctual that way. Instincts can be taught, and they're taught by experiences. And that's where you learn that stuff, is by trial and error and going through it and going through that process. And that's where the pitch calling of, just getting in the middle of the moment and doing it yourself. Because as much as everybody says, I'll tell them how to do it and I'll explain why I did it. Well, they're not going to learn from that. They're only going to truly learn and develop that experience by being in a heated moment, not having anybody tell them what to do, and then they have to do it. But where the teaching point comes in is after the fact, then sit down and explain the situation with them about what happened. That's where the teaching point comes in, not before it. It always comes after it. And again, that's where John Russell, I attribute a lot of it because he caught one of Nolan Ryan's no hitters. Very good at pitch calling. Spent a lot of time, it's obviously usually career being a catcher. So I was very lucky to have him around. Don Wakamatsu was another really great guy that I learned a lot when I was in Major League level for catching. Is just handling more catchers and the pitching staffs. And obviously, some of my greatest coaches weren't even coaches; they were pitchers. Is just getting to know them. Catching Greg Maddox was one of the best things ever in my entire life, let alone career. But just a simple understanding of just watching and paying attention. And don't try to trick anybody. Just watch, and they'll tell you instead of trying to come up with some fancy thing that's not there. Just watch what's there, and it's more simple than what you think. We a lot of times we try to overcomplicate the simplicity of it, and let it be simple. Just don't find a hard way to do it.
Very nice. And then you got called up to the big league at 22. What was that like? What was that phone call like?
Oh, it was a whirlwind because being at that age, and there were not and this is, like I said, the game has changed so much, especially since I've been out for a while now. It's gotten so much younger. Is there weren't a whole lot of really, really young kids in the big leagues during that time in the early 2000s. And I played with a lot of older guys. Every Minnesota had a lot of older guys. I went to San Diego, a lot of older guys. So the young guys were very, very thin in each team. Where now you look at it now, it's like flipped. If you're 28 in the big leagues, you're like a dinosaur now. But that's so for me. The shock of it is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to the big leagues. And all this stuff when I was a kid, I see these guys playing on TV. I was like, this is nothing but a dream, but my dream became a reality. So now it's like, okay, now all the stuff I've been thinking of, I actually have to do it. I actually have to play on TV every day. I have to be that guy every day. And the first couple months when I was up there, they went by so fast. My first game I got to go into, I blinked and it was over, and I don't even know what the heck I did. It was so fast, and that's where people talk about the speed of the game and learning how to slow it down and all that stuff. When you first go up there and you first call up and you're up there for the first couple of days. Mine first couple of weeks and a couple of months, oh my goodness, it's just that adjustment period. It's so fast because you're just like, oh my gosh. So you got to take it in, let it sink in, celebrate a little bit, but then you got to get back to your routine. Your routine settles you in, and that was what I had to learn at the big league level now. Was all right. Let me get to my routine to this, so that way I can calm myself down and start to kind of even out and now be a part of it.
Yeah, in your routine, one thing I was just kind of thinking about, being a catcher, your routine involves sitting down with the pitcher and coming up with a game plan for each guy. What were those conversations like?
Yeah, at the major league level, we did a little bit at the minor league level, but the major league level obviously different in terms of the information access that you get. At least when I was playing now, I know it's different now. But, so we'd sit down at the beginning of a series and go over every single hitter. And we were watching video and, go over game plans and plans of attacks, seeing tendencies of the hitters, specifically in the last week of what they've been doing. But obviously, you want a historical view. But, what they've been doing in the last 7 to 10 games is huge. So you take an aspect, both of them, and formulating plans of attack and, seeing what you're doing. So that way you guys are on the same page as you go through the game, because that's the key, is build that foundation and build that relationship. So you guys have an understanding of what we're trying to attack for each hitter. And those are things to remember. And it takes a lot of time, but it takes a lot of courage, especially for a young guy like I was, to sit there and talk to guys like a Johan Santana, who ended up winning a Cy Young, and tell them this is what we're going to do. Because I was like, here I am, some measly little kid, trying to tell a Johan Santana or a Joe Nathan or a Brad Radke, this is our plan of attack. And it was kind of nerve-wracking at first. And then after you do it a little while, and then you start to see the trust that's starting to be built, and then it's different. Because that was my hard part right there, was trying to feel included. Like, man, do I put my foot down and say something, or I just kind of go with the flow? And that's a big step for a person in their career, when they can finally put their foot down and talk and get to that same level.
So what would the game plan like for a guy like Barry Bonds?
Uh, hopefully he pops up. Hopefully he gets himself
Yeah,
out because
yeah,
it's the only way you're gonna get him out.
right.
That was it. You know, the guy doesn't swing at a ball. I mean, so you just hope to God that he misses.
Yeah,
But as you look in his career, he didn't really miss all that
right,
much. And you know, people say what they want about the steroids and all that stuff. Um, he's a hell of a hitter. He's one of the best hitters I've ever seen in my entire life. And without the steroids, he's still going to the Hall of Fame. So, in my opinion, he's a Hall of Fame player.
right. So at the big league level, you get to be around some of the best in the world. And so the beauty of that is you kind of get to learn something from them. What were some of the things that you learned from some of these other guys?
Uh, you know, a lot of it is again is refining the routine so that way you can be consistent and you can execute at the major league level. Because, like I said, you know, the pace is so much faster because there's not as many mistakes, so everything is smoother. But again, it's the mental approach and the plan of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to execute. Because to be that good and have very few misses, a lot of people think it's all mechanical, and everybody just wants to break down mechanical. But when you start talking to a hitter, talking to a pitcher about what they're doing to execute before they even make a pitch, you start to realize that, okay, it's more than just I need to get to this angle right here. All that's created because of what they're thinking and what they're trying to accomplish before they even pick their foot up to swing or to throw. And, you know, that's where everybody always talks about, you know, they can tell the difference between a big league hitter and a minor league hitter or an amateur hitter when you watch them on the tee and watch their process and watch their focus. I mean, it's precision, and so that's what I really picked up from those guys.
Right, and I want to kind of go back to the minor leagues. Part of that whole minor league experience. Part of that is getting you to kind of understand who you are. What your strengths and weaknesses are. But then you're kind of working on developing a game plan and approach. And having the discipline to stick to your plan. Now, how tough is it? Because you just want to jump up. You just want to go up there, jump on the ball, and hit it.
Yeah,
So, how hard is it to develop that discipline?
it's that's the that again. That's the silver bullet that everybody's looking for. Everybody is in search of that answer, and and it's not always so cut and dry. Even though people, you know, and as I say this, it sounds like it's real cut and dry, but again, it's nerve wracking. It's the maturity and mentality, and it's the patience and the trust in yourself to let it happen. And for the discipline is, you know, do I do I take the bait and try to swing at that ball a little bit further out there because I think I can hit it, and I go and try to hit it, or what it comes down to most of the time is, and this is where a lot of hitting instructors and a lot of hitters kind of get they kind of get backlogged and they get hurt is they come up with ideas like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, I'm not gonna swing until I get this fastball, you know, in this, you know, this area right here, and they see that fastball and they just miss it, and then you start talking to them and you're like, man, I was looking for a fastball, but then you all of a sudden go in the back of their mind, or they mention, I was like, well, crap, he could have thrown a curveball too, and then that's where the light bulb comes on for somebody who at that major league level and have that success. Will tell them immediately is that's the reason why you missed a fastball is you came up with a plan, but you did not have 100% conviction in your plan because you just mentioned that a curveball came through your mind and messed you up on that fastball approach. And that's I see so much of it with hitters today and coaches today and teaching adjustability and making sure that you can hit, you know, have the ability to hit that other pitch. If you can't hit that fastball and square it up, you, you're not going to be able to be successful at this level. So if you're trying to be ready for everything, every single pitch, you're going to be ready for nothing. And major league, you listen to major league hitters, especially after games, talking about, a game-winning home run, a game-winning base hit, and you sit there and they talk about, I knew the pitcher, I knew from his background and, what he tried to do to me earlier in the game, he tried to throw that slider, so I was sitting there waiting for a slider, and I got it, and I didn't miss it. That's what they're sitting on. They're not waiting for, they don't worry about the fastball or, try to hit that fastball and a slider. They're totally committed to one thing only. That's the hardest part when it comes to discipline of a young hitter or a pitcher too, even what he wants to try to throw to a hitter. But since we're talking about hitting specifically right now, is the discipline to stay on one thing and not worry about anything else. Because if you have a sliver of worry, your timing is going to be altered. And if your timing's altered, obviously we all know what happens when you square everything go right and you still go wrong. So when you have a sliver of doubt, that's all it takes to be just off and you miss. And so that's where you talk to major league hitters and guys who had a lot of success. They hit like it was 3-0 every single count. They knew a fastball was coming. The only thing they worried about. So that's when I talk about the mental approach and a plan and having an idea, is having the discipline to throw everything out the window and have absolute tunnel vision for that and that only. And that's what's going to make it easier to lay off the pitches and to not bite on so much stuff. But again, it takes time. It takes experience to do it. That's why so many guys are really good in the cage, because they can do that. But when they go in that game and that little sliver kind of jumps in there, the temptation jumps into where, gosh, he might do that. So, there's that little fringe is what gets them out. And that's a separator from guys. And to me, that just doesn't get talked enough. It doesn't get coached enough. But that's what's going to make you successful. And that's what lines up your mechanic. Everybody talks about the perfect mechanics on the major league guy that hit that, 2-2 slide, that 2-1 slider for a homer. Well, if he wasn't sitting on it, I guarantee it. Or if he wasn't sitting on it, everything lines up with mechanics. And you won't see that if he's, in 2 strikes. You won't see that same type of swing. That'll be different. He won't hit it 450 feet. He'll hit it for a base hit. He has the ability to just put that barrel out of it. If he wants to square that thing up and hit it like they put on TV, on SportsCenter, on highlights, he's sitting on that thing. That's why that swing on the counter is so smooth. There's no hesitation, no delay. Is because his ability to be disciplined on staying with what he wants to do, not veer off of it.
Right. Well, Rob, I want to be conscious of your time, but I would kind of like to end this with, your last year was 2008. What was the transition like from being a professional athlete, playing baseball your whole life, and it's kind of all and it's kind of almost your identity, So what was it like going from that to doing what you are today?
It was hard. I wanted to do law enforcement. I'm a lieutenant and a canine handler for Sheriff's Office down here in South Georgia now. I always wanted to do something in law enforcement or military when I was coming up as a kid, along with being a baseball player. I didn't realize this would come this quick. So that was the hardest part for me, was kind of switching over and doing that. And I've thought about, doing the coaching thing and all, but I had kind of had a passion for law enforcement and the love of that. And I get to get my fill in with doing camps and personal lessons and stuff like that in my company, Railroad Baseball. But I take the same mentality and the same process that I did in baseball, and I tend to work habits, and I switched it over to another career. And so when I went to the police academy, I graduated the first of my class in academics. I graduated. I was the best shooter in the class, and I was the best overall cadet in the class, because I took the same desire and work ethic and the wants that I had playing and switched it over and just put it to a new career. So that way, I just saturated myself with it. And where I shoot now, being a SWAT team, and they shoot competitively every once in a while at different competitive matches. Just now, I have to shoot for my life now being in law enforcement. So being a pretty good shooter will help in this profession. But it's stuff that I love now, and working canines is having a police canine that I've got now, and drug detection and patrol and all this type of stuff, and understanding the law, and working these things and being on a SWAT team that I am now is I do stuff outside of my normal work duties that not a lot of people do, and that's what's always people come across and they give me compliments and saying is, gosh, you always do so much more. That's the best compliment that I can ever get. I don't, compliment people say I'm good and all that, and I got natural talent. I got a natural knack for it. I was like, nothing is natural. This is all man-made. This is all me working. So that's why it looks natural, is because of how much work that I've put in to my baseball career, my law enforcement career, everything I try to do. But again, I credit my parents for that. Is my upbringing, and how they instilled those things in me as a young kid has obviously made me successful in baseball. I guess relatively speaking, when you look at my stats, but everything in life that I do is I just don't settle for being average. Average sucks. Anybody can be average. If I do something, I want to be really good at it, and the only way to be really good at it is to study it, learn it, and work harder than everybody else. And then you'll be successful at it. And that's where, I've got a kind of a saying is like success comes from outworking everybody else. Is the more information that you get, and you can learn it and become better at it and understand it, truly understand it, to where you can teach it back to somebody. That is knowing content. That is knowing something. And you'll be surprised at what your output becomes then. When you truly know it.
I love it, Rob. This has been a great conversation. A lot of nuggets. I really appreciate your time and appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your story with us.
Oh, definitely. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.